before. You lie awake and count yourself again and find that more is less and less is more. Where you have always been, the sea will not forbid itself the shore. The loneliness compels you to arise and touch the broken edges of dark. Is it bigger than the loneliness of skies? Listen, you can hear the dog star bark louder than it ever barked before. Your life falls into blackness dark. The sea will not forbid itself the shore. The lighthouse lamp goes starry and goes dark. And this is the closing poem to that 10-point sequence, or the 10-poem sequence. It's called Close. I've begun to think that God is small, like a wren, a piece of blue beach glass shining in the wet of sea and sky, that double exposure. Every day, the huge sun, the blue vault brimming with invisible stars. Each night, the echoing expanse of, and always God in the palm of my hand, fluttering, gleaming like the soul, with sweetness, with a vast reluctance to change us or give us anything but that sweetness, dismissed by the world because so small. This is called Historical Perspective. I said, it concerns one of my old professors, a history professor, who is very fond of referring to historical perspective. It concerns one of my old professors, a history professor, who is very fond of referring to historical perspective. Historical perspective. Blue spider sing along the spine of my tattered volume of Tacitus. If you are the ghost of Professor Snacken, who caused me to acquire the book, how is it to walk this glass conjecture? I'll bet it's hard to lift those legs when not in use, when you're dreaming of your old fireside surrounded by beautiful daughters who fail will ever die. I believe it also, and here you are, terribly changed, but still contentious eyes sparkling like fists of tiny diamonds, beginning to weave what become your other history. When once in a while your old name comes up, I, ghostly student, will shake my head. Ah, Tacitus, contention and change, always his special topics. Tacitus, who became this book in which I find you again. In a while your old name comes up, I, ghostly student, will shake my head. Ah, Tacitus, contention and change, always his special topics. Tacitus, who became this book in which I find you again. I had my reading all planned, but as usual, one keeps changing it. This poem is called Implicit, and its subject matter and its point of view, I think, will be obvious. I had my reading all planned, but simply the last one. Writes in gold on a pale blue cheekbone of sky above a hill. Go on crows in a field, go on forgetting all planned. Their curiosity twitching on and off. A series of casual maimings. Beheaded garter snakes, heaps of wingless bees, the sweet neighborhood children thinking of lunch as they work. Be the last one, a chime of the not and the never. There it goes, fading now, and we can't stop its going. Should we hold hands, perhaps, sing, offer all we have, if only? So important, really, when
You think cares if it's the last one, just like each of us, becoming rumor, absent mist, light of a long dead star in our future past. Who cares but our bearing sister, the earth, remembering plenitude. The last one, just like each of us, becoming rumor, absent mist, light of a long dead star in our future past. Who cares but our bearing sister, the earth, remembering plenitude. Last one, just like each of us, becoming rumor, absent mist. This is called The Last Bust. Called The Last Bus, and it's a prose poem, so it takes a little time to read. Sat on desolate Pacific Avenue, waiting for the last bus to Parkland, though it would go only as far as D Street and turn back to the barn, leaving me to trudge like a fallen angel past the strip clubs, bars, and all-night diners, past the loom of last call and drowsy cab eyeing me blankly, Patsy Cline and Connie Francis leaking from their radios like all the sorrow in the world. I had been to see my girl, spent the week's $6, bus fare, the movie, coffee, and just enough left to get me almost home. Maybe I thought of the tower room above the music department where we had made love in a splash of the moon. Maybe I thought such nights would never end, that love with the food would nourish wonder all the way to God. It began to rain. Maybe I knew we would become strangers, as I was myself a kind of stranger. The crooked neon smile of the sign of the Silver Slipper said this was likely. Maybe I thought of the 2 cigarettes waiting in my room next to a history of the Roman Republic, glorious, righteous, and doomed by nothing but the world it had itself assembled, believing it would last as the gods would last. Maybe the boy I thought as terrible or mysterious or right as the rain that made him shiver at who he was, and if true destiny was perhaps the shape of all be. I have walked ever since with the weight of the obvious growing less and singular, lit from within as though it were a house or that last bus parked somewhere out beyond the rain.
Thank you, Chris. Josh asked me if you could reframe your camera a little bit.
Say that again, Tom.
Yeah, if you could reframe your camera a little bit so we get a full picture. A full view.
I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah.
Is that better or worse?
It seems better to me.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, a full facial view. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. One I was going to read here, I seem to have lost it. Not surprising. Okay. Between shores. Another crossing. It was the river of death, and we crossed it, or the river of forgetting. Why I don't remember crossing it. Holding your hands, we were reborn strangers to her and ourselves, flyaway spirits whose bodies were dreaming. Love was not our number, and the days, if they were days, were like any dark limb or whistle, any moment singing from the back room an old hotel where no one sat bar with no one else, carving in dust the signals of our disappearance. This is a wound, not this crossing under the moonlights of the boatman who has waited among the willows all these years, sad patience, old fire of human things, lost things, beauty itself, bent to its oars inside us. This poem is called To Get Anywhere. It's for James Tate, in memory of James Tate. Jesus sat down in the dust. Well, he said, the body must walk a long way in this life. He said this to no one, but meant it. After a while, some men came out of the bushes and asked how he was doing there. Jesus, didn't he know this was private property? Well, Jesus got up slowly and blessed them before moving on, stopping every few yards to scrawl in charcoal on a wall or rock. Should a peaceful life really require this much kindness? Or, Jews are my best friends. I myself am a Jew. Later, this will be conveniently forgotten. Trust me. Or, the dust is beautiful. See how it rises and falls to rise again. As he plodded on, he kept thinking, I wish I had a donkey. With a donkey, you don't have to walk. You can go anywhere. There'd be no stopping me if I had a donkey. Okay. I think I'll read the title poem of this book. This is called Homecoming. I put on my good black shoes, my shirt of gray softness that reminds me of luck, and the blue hat given me by a child who left this earth, shadow made so beautiful. And then, well, I set out down the cliffs and almost by accident onto paths through dense apothecaries of evergreen and fern, and finally to meadows and orchards, risen the dead into a contentment that did not know me and wouldn't take my money and name. Did I not see I was the same no one who had lived there always and could never return? Did I not perceive multitudes waving their arms like wind to be known again and gathered like pieces of a god? How many, many years, how much spent blood to unpilgrim ourselves, to stand before an empty house, listening with the grief of a happy life. So then I thought I would read some material. And some of it is from a new volume will be coming out next year, which is entitled Book of Beginnings and Ends. Poem from my father on Veterans Day. If I wake in the night and open the door, what I suppose is that gray house where almost nothing has been broken since the war, or one of the wars, in which pride and trouble and rage were made manifest and purified by the frank absence of war's necessity. What truth could I send back to my father, dead these 25 years? My father who knows already that most of the world's contention comes to nothing. How could I bring him out there in his boat, fishing his silent happiness, time having loosened its success and left him peaceful as wind that barely stirs cattails along the reedy shore? And what a shore, now since anything is possible. In longing and memory, I build plank by plank, the whole of it, turning vaguely as it passes under a bridge, one light glimmering in a window, tired-looking angels asleep on the roof, demons and sorrows asleep outside in the snow. He addresses the inner life. The inner life. I suppose is a vague term. On the other hand, it seems to me to describe what I'm mostly writing about. I mean, all these years. And so it was interesting to me to sort of confront it, to sort of conjure it, I suppose, as something I could speak to. It's the inner life. Where is the rest of me in relation to you would be my first question. Can I reach you with a kind of kiss or touch phrase, such as one might speak to a god? Are you a god there in my bones, built of passion and grief and refusing advice? Sometimes I think you are a lost swan telling a story to rushes and ponds and longing to fly like the others, if there are others. For all I know, you are a community or a nearly invisible liquid stillness to which I am at times allowed to see color become perfect again, like the morning in which I see myself unfrightened and forgiven and in love, timelessly walking up a green hill in an absent with one light shining, whispering, "This is your life, be glad." Poem of the year. Though the lilac has passed its bloom, sometimes hummingbird right there, each an offering with its own melodic color. When they depart, longing follows them, and what is left of my heart, perhaps only the nectar, darts away also, sudden thought of something ruby-throated and watching with its wings. Stillness may be the left hand of an execution or a monument, lilies with their burden of faded blossom. Everything really happened, even when the fire rolled, the fox gone over the hill, the lamp unlit and nowhere to be found. Is it true we are inaccurate maps of ourselves, gardens surprised and helpless before the mystery of their own design? The hour of my life is late. The first cricket invokes the moon across which the flocks are flying. Such lonely unity, this starlit migration, and under it, the few remaining angels gowned in bright leaves and swaying like the rest of us on their mortal stems. Okay. A messenger. I heard you arrive, soft fit against the glass sliding door, and found you perfect as an image of yourself on the gray boards of the porch, eyes still fixed on the shining sheet of sky that killed you. No name really comes with this sadness, the rust of things, fracture and falling away like moments or angels we wish for and never see. Your soft silk russet black breast is warm still, as though you might suddenly stand and fly up into the fiery maple again. But you are in the underlife, where my child, the one who could not fly and was lost, has been these many years. I hope you will tell her I handed you gently into the tall grass, that I grieved for you and all mortal accident, that I know she has the heart, beautiful bird now, somewhere in time or its absence, that blew on you softly in case you might be brought to breathe again. Okay. I seem to write a lot of poems about the darkness, and I stay up late. Just a habit you get into. or I suppose it's an affection or an attraction to the solitude of it. I don't know. In any case, this next book is filled with these night poems, and here's one of them. The small towns go by in my sleep. The small towns go by in my sleep as though I were passing through on a train. Their lights, little campfires in the wash of the train rushing velocity. Home, I think, of each house where sleepers drift above themselves, angelic and riding the mind's breeze as I do, the dancing and clapping of hands, a fog falling to water. Oh, anything may be living in them as the train sends its whistle out, play with the impossible generations, each slipping past and through one of their small towns and trains of hope as morning pales in the very top branches of the and the names of the last imperial governors who believed themselves godly or spoken of or blessed sail by. And in spite of time, whatever the sleepers have ever known they wanted follows the rails all night, and all night lasts and lasts.
Mm.
Midwatch. A term in the Navy we gave to the midnight watch. Angels recline under a red umbrella for 6 years, praising God by yawning and watching the small brown birds flit and chatter in the daffodils. They have seen the Black Knight and his henchmen rise and founder. They have seen the witches praising Satan as they burned, seen God's grace absolve them to illuminate the meaning of grace. They have invented all 72 forms of solitaire and named each barnacle and scuttling crab and all seas. Their happiness is so intense, they hand it back and forth, cooing as though it were a child, the very one for which the world has been searching with lies, knives, and homemade explosive devices. Their names are Charlene and Mustafa. Sometimes they turn the birds from flesh to glass and back again, just to terrify the shepherds with wonder, just to hear the timbre of God's voice calling, "Hey, cut that out!" Oh, a whole bunch of night poems here. Each night at an opera house. The Dzerzhinsky, who's referred to in this poem, is the dad who's famous for making leaps that seemed inhuman during his performances. He stayed aloft not so long. Dzerzhinsky wakes up in the grave and does a little pearl-like dance for the image of the great crystal spider that claps and claps like a galaxy calling its children home. Some kind of tide brushes the face of his uniform. Footlights come up. He dances deliberately across a lake somewhere, wishing all of Paris awake again, dumbfounded by the alien bloom of his body turned to music. A kind of lonely happiness, frightening a room, its arms becoming wings again, joining the dead swans in their millions. Each night is an opera house no one knew was there. Centuries step away from the wall, and Dzerzhinsky embraces them as if what lives there were a kind of forgetting, reborn with each elegant leap into the darkening air. Is this a homecoming? His twirling gray garments answering a whistle like the doomed legions who will go over the top in that war that will rage and rage. And then finally, nothing but itself. Impossibly again, among the vanished crowds and their cheering, he begins to consider his descent. Will he lilt down like a leaf, topple like a tower thrown down by a giant's mad despair? Much is unexplained. For instance, dreaming this exactly, we might wonder if we, the earthbound, do not also have the right to spring, so to speak, even as we wonder at his arms outstretched as if to grasp in midair a dreamed kingdom between love that has broken down and a heaven that, though empty, may still be there. Okay. This is called The Parable as Originally Told. It was a story nobody knew, and nobody could possibly know a story, more or less untold. A man with no arms finds a railroad spike and a hunk of cheese beside a dying cat. To the man with no arms, the cat says, "When I must shed this mortal coil, this veil of fleas, it is my fondest wish that these, my only possessions, should pass to someone worthy of their panic luster, their duende. Are you such a one, O man with no arms?" The man with no arms enters a frenzy of nodding and falls forward upon these treasures, devouring the spike straight away and furiously at the cheese. The end. It's fun to surprise yourself when you're writing. You have no idea where something came from. It's a great pleasure, to discover that something was there. Something was there somehow in your sensibility that you didn't know. I had no inkling about. That would describe the provenance of the poem I just read. These two poems I'm reading are both from Love's Last Number, which is the previous book. But I wanted to read this poem because it's kind of a Portland poem. When I was growing up, I frequently spent nights with my father's grandmother. She was quite elderly. To watch Friday night wrestling. She would, make popcorn and we would sit there and watch Friday night wrestling. It was a time when occasionally the people that ran it was at the National Guard Armory downtown. I remember they would have someone from the major national circuit come through and wrestle one of the local guys, and the big villain of the local wrestlers was named Tony Bourne. Some of you might remember. The Limits of Mercy, this is called. It was tough Tony Bourne strutting in the ring again, having thrown Gorgeous George over the turnbuckle into the third row in a great clattering roar of smashed folding chairs. Beside me on the couch, my grandmother shook her head and made a disapproving sound with her lips. Tough Tony beat his chest. As the vanquished foe struggled to climb back through the ropes, he took hold of that cascade of broom-colored hair, lifted like the citizen holding up King Louis's head beside the guillotine, and gave George's face a well-placed knee. "Oh," my grandmother said, "mercy." Then we reached into the blue bowl between us for more popcorn. Two more poems. My youth. I'm still holding a girl's hand by a fence in the dark schoolyard after the dance class our parents insisted we attend. Her blue dress still graces my knuckle as we move, dreamy and embarrassed, springtime softening the little light there is or would ever be. I still believe if I touched her light brown hair, it would be transformed and ennobled by its luster, as Arthur was ennobled when Guinevere turned that first time and looked straight into his eyes, the total of that. I'm still slipping out as the house dissolves in sleep to walk rain-perfumed berry farms and empty fields. At the slouching Groot Hall, the one caretaker is drunk again, and as I pass, holds up his arms, a little like Moses, that the waters part and spare us all. He's still there, surely, if walking backward, I could undo the knots of cold disaster, the freight train of unremarkable days with their immense load of nothing I could name. I'm still in canoes, baseball games, fistfights, and dry movies with their huge godlike screens and sputtering speaks. Still tasting my grandmother's raspberry pie, stealing my first slugs of whiskey and getting too smashed to stand. Next day I'll be singing in the choir beside my father's booming baritone and thinking of that girl again, one who comes back in her blue dress always, who holds my hand without speaking, who danced with me all through those years of tedious lessons, who looks straight into my eyes. Good Portland to end with, I hope. Above the Oaks Park amusement arcade, the beloved dead come near us again. Above the river and the skating rink lights gone out, the dead gather again and wish I would shut up and listen. And no touching, they say, no bright day returning. All they want is the dusty shine they have become, and that I stop longing for their empty shells and simply take one step nearer the chilled, ahistorical flame, their actuality, their timelessness that is like water or memory with nothing in it. Turn your head slightly away and see us, they say. We are love's night vision. They whispers up your arms. Here, beyond mobility and chance, we're perfect and close. To know us again, think of lights on the mind, the barkers calling everyone, even the beloved who have left no forwarding address, back for one more ride. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christopher.
Right.
Appreciate it a lot. We are virtual, but I'd like you to hear long and sustained applause. Long and sustained applause from our listeners.
I'm always ready for long and sustained applause.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can tell you, too, that I remember Tough Tony Bourne.
Oh, yeah, you do.
But also George.
Yeah.
I go back that far. Thank you for reading the poem, too, Above the Oaks Park Amusement Arcade, because that's the poem for the broadside. I'm going to be sending out an email to everybody who registered. It would be on our broadside, and if we were meeting in person, we'd have it printed up and actually be a broadside that we'd hand out. But since we're virtual, I'm sending them out by email.
Well, I'm virtually pleased.
Well, so many images, Christopher. The oncology of the soul. God is small. Jesus sat down on the death. The grief of a happy life. You've got a new book coming out, the book of beginnings and ends. And I want to remind everybody that we are having questions and answers. So if you want to put a question in the chat, please do. Some more images that I heard. Demons and sorrows outside, sleep in the snow. Look is part of his bloom. The first credits. As though I were passing through, as though I was passing by in a train. The last own. All night lasts and lasts. The angels recline under a red umbrella. And I think the last one I got, and remember your grandmother's raspberry pie. So thank you very much for all of those. I suppose the first question I'd like, while we're waiting to see if there's some questions from the chat. Oh, we do have a question in the chat, actually, about your new book. Who's publishing your new book? And that's from David Lyons.
It's being published by Stephen F. Austin University Press. It's a little college down in Texas. And they have a nice poetry program, a nice poetry list. They do a good job with the books. And they said yes in 4 days. So, and all of those things are good. More, you can wait 18 months, for an answer. And then when the answer comes, even if yes, we think we can do this within 3 years. I'm not about to do that. I'm not an age where I'm not waiting, 3.5 or 4 years for books to come out. So I was very pleased to find out about the press and very pleased that they liked the book. So,
when's that going to be out? Do you know?
Well, they tell me it will be out in 2022. That's as far as it gets, apparently.
Okay.
But that's firm enough for me.
Okay. Well, good things on that. And we're going to have information that is going to come up on the credits at the end about where to get Chris's books that are already. Let me start a question and ask you who you're reading now.
What am I reading now? Let's see. Yeah. Well, I liked very much Ilya Kaminsky's book, Deaf Republic. I thought that did some unusual things. The kind of puppet show quality of many of the poems. An overall sense of a dramatic whole that the book presented is unusual and really pleasing. I'm always reading anything Laura Kosicki publishes. I find her just a wonderfully inventive poet. Also, there's great fluidity in the poems, just the way they move. There's a poet, Melissa Kwasny, whose work I cherish, and I've been reading work from her that is so far unpublished. So I guess I'm ranging about. I haven't found. I don't have any great discoveries to speak of. I am a publisher as well, and we just published a book by Nance Van Winkle called "The Many Beds of Martha Washington," which is part of the Pacific Northwest Poetry Series that my press, Lynx House Press, has taken over. And I'm really, really fond of that book, and have high hopes for its going forth in the world.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you on that.
Sure.
Here's a question from Lex Runciman.
Lex.
Yes. And he asks, Chris, your poem is a world. Can you talk about what gets into the poem and what gets left out?
Can I talk about what?
What gets left in, what gets into your poems, and what gets left out?
Okay. Well, that's an interesting question. The inclusion-exclusion question. I like phrasing and imagery that's resonant. I like it to do something besides describe. I want it to have a tone to it, an undertone. I want to suggest that that it's not pictorial somehow, that it has, if it's figurative, that it has the effect of figurative language. That's what I like to keep in the poems, and what goes out of them often is I suppose called mechanical structures. Let's say the ordinary mapping of movement. They go out if they don't really do anything except describe the movement of something that's in the poem from one place to another. I want everything that's in there to be doing a little more than simply describing. So if it feels like it's not doing anything but description, then it seems to me like it's kind of ancillary, and I'm apt to set it aside to listen to it and think about it, whether or not I want to put it back. I do a lot of cutting, and a lot of what I cut doesn't seem to me very active, as language or as idea. It's just I don't know, language. It's not doing very much. I want it to do something besides just sit there.
Yeah. Well, you said you do a lot. Do you do a lot of putting back?
No, I don't do a lot of putting back. Yeah. I do a lot of cutting, and usually it doesn't go back in once I cut it out.
Okay.
I've been an editor all these years, and my own approach to my writing is essentially an editorial approach. I just keep tightening and trying to find the language that's really active, and to push everything else to the margins, and ultimately over the margins and off of the page.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who would you say influenced you? Did that come across? Maybe I'm muted.
No, it didn't come across. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Next question is, who would you say influenced you or has influenced you?
James Wright, particularly. Really, James Wright and the other people that are more or less conventionally associated with him, frequently referred to as the deep image poets. W.S. Merwin, Galway Kinnell, Robert Bly. Some of my former students really had an impact on me. Yusuf Omanyaka, for instance, even when he was a student, he taught me a good deal about muscle, I guess. Let's say the idea of the poem being a force and having force inside of it. He had that, even when he showed up at school. He didn't have to be taught by anybody to do that. But I think that he provided a really interesting example, it seems to me, and useful, and continuingly useful, at least to me.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
My wife Jane is here with me in the Willamette Falls media, and I'm going to see if she wants to ask the next question.
Can you ask him what made him start? I was wondering what made you start writing poetry. How did it begin, and how did it evolve?
Did you hear that?
No, I didn't. Sorry.
That's the question.
She's asking, how did you start writing poetry? And what got you into it in the first place?
Yeah. Well, I'd always been moved by it, but I never really tried to write it until I was taking a course in English literature and as a sophomore in college. And we were dealing with the Romantics, and I was reading this stuff and saying to myself, this is nothing. I can do that. I can master this art form. And so I started writing them, and then I couldn't, as usual, it mastered me, really. I couldn't stop doing it. When it started, it was endlessly involving. And it was all kinds of discovery. It was there all the time, again and again. So it was kind of, I suppose you could say it was addictive. I just didn't stop after I started. Then in my sophomore year in college, I had been writing. I'd written stories, and I guess I considered myself someone on the road to being a writer, but I didn't know what that meant. And then I don't think I ever really wrote a serious fiction after that. It was just always poetry.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
One more question, I think. And while we're doing that, it's good to end with a poem. So we might take another question, one more if there is one, and then some poem that you'd like to end with.
I see. Okay.
So I wanted to ask you about talking about your book, The Grief of a Happy Life. And how did that come about? I wonder if you could talk about writing that.
Well, I've suffered, some losses everybody has.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that you discover is that the grief is not, it's not sheerly destructive. It has this other side. It calls up your affection for what it is that you have lost. It reminds you that you had this love inside you, that you have it still. It reaffirms that sort of emotional commitment. And it's part of what allows you to keep going and to have, in spite of grief that is inevitable for people, a happy life. Grief it's not destructive in that way. I suppose it can be. I mean, your circumstances can be so grievous, I suppose, that there's just no daylight left. But if you're lucky, that's not going to be the case. If you're lucky, the grief keeps bringing you back to your affections. And
Mhm.
You know, and I have had that experience, so I wanted to write about it, or I didn't. I had to write about it. I didn't even really think that that's what I did. Imagine that's what I was writing about. Really, you know, it dawned on me finally.
Mhm.
Just why I titled the book as I did.
Mhm. Well, that's very well said. So thank you. And there aren't any more questions in the chat. And that seems like a good place to end. I want to just say thanks.
Sure.
Peter, it's been wonderful listening to you read and having you in the Milwaukie Poetry Series. So I'm very glad about that. Do you have a poem you'd like to end with?
Yeah. Just give me a second. uh, uh, yeah. This is called Crossing Jordan. And I wrote this whole group of poems, which not in the book, it's just the one poem, about a group of Christian anarchists who are trying to cross the plains, and they keep stopping every few days and destroying more of their earthly belongings as a sort of a sort of ritual of celebration and also an invocation to their protection. And so this is a poem about that group of people. They're not Mormons, incidentally, but they would come back, I think, in my thinking anyway, somewhere in the 1850s. Crossing Jordan. Having eaten the chickens, dogs, cattle, horses, our belts, leather vests, and shoes, we came at last to the river, great silver blue spillage carving its monument and grave in the endless grass. We fell face down and drank, a writhing stillness filling us like lust, or the sort of prayer they don't teach you. Leaves revolved on the stream like golden boats, carelessly adrift, open to the sky that seemed to be watching as we herded small fish into the shallows and ate them alive and squirming. Later, we made fire in the shadow of a cut bank and slept and rose and ate and drank and slept. And on the third day, we rose as our Lord, to whom we had prayed all the way from St. Joe, and who had indeed delivered us so that we thought the far shore surely must flow with milk and something sweet. So we made our crossing, the stream being wide but shallow. Only one 9-year-old boy broke the human chain, and so was swept away. Brother Jacoby said it was what God and the river required by way of sacrifice, and the boy's father for him with a knife. Thus discord came upon us and a taint upon the new land, so that some of us longed for our lives as they had been before we dared to cross the glinting vein, before we dared the Lord to give us everything. But finally, with the river at our backs, it seemed wrong to think this. Praise the Lord and his angels, we said, when we buried the torn and bloated boy who had reached down with both hands for something bright in the water.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks for being here with us.
My pleasure.
Ashley Tolliver is going to be here in January on the second Wednesday of the month. Thanks, everybody, for being here and logging in for our reading tonight. It's been great having Christopher Howell as our poet and Good night, everybody. Happy holidays.
Yeah. Happy holiday.